Hello there. I think it's time I finally fess up that I guess I like keyboards because I was offered this keyboard from Jerry a while ago and I opened this up in a mail video and I've honestly been really excited about the potential opportunity of trying out this thing because this is an original Happy Hacking keyboard. That is the second revision of it, which just means it supports Mac, and I'll get into what that means later, but I'm really curious to try this thing out and see what it's like. So I'm actually going to use it for an entire week before this video is over so that I really know what it's like. But in my eyes, the HHK is one of the progenitors of the entire custom and alternative aftermarket keyboard industry, like my Keychron K8 here. So I'm actually really curious to see what this thing is like. So today, I'm going to be doing a very in-depth analysis on the original HHK. Let's start out by talking about what this is. This is an original Happy Hacking keyboard, or I should say Happy Hacking Keyboard 2, because this is the second revision, being a PDKB02 instead of an 01, but the only real difference between the two is support for ADB for Macintosh and the inclusion of the Compose key legends on the keyboard. Now, the original HHKs are known for being membrane keyboards. They do not have the Torps switches that people are more familiar with in the later ones. So the original is not necessarily well regarded for its key feel, but I think it was intended more for being silent than anything else, but I'll see when I get it out and try it. Now, there's one more thing I want to talk about before we open this up and take a look at it to help set the expectations, and that is the cost, because it was kind of expensive. But when I tell you that it was 29,800 yen, that doesn't really mean a whole lot because it came out in 1996, so we'd have to do inflation conversion, but also currency conversion, because I suspect there aren't that many of you watching this English-speaking video that understand the buying power of yen. So I came up with an idea on how we could figure out what the equivalent buying power of 29,800 yen would be by looking at a contemporary product from 1996. So, for comparison, in 1996, the Nintendo 64, also originally released in Japan, was 25,000 yen. That was more expensive. So to try and get up to that price, you could also buy a controller for 2,500 yen, but that we're only at 7,500 yen. So you could also buy a memory card, which was 1,000 yen. So we're up to 28,500 yen. We are still 1,300 yen short of a keyboard, and we have a Nintendo 64, a second controller, and a memory pack. Now, the equivalent prices for these in the US when this released would have been 200 or 250 for the console, depending on whether or not you want to take into account the price reduction they gave it right at launch to compete with the PlayStation, $30 for the controller, and $20 for the memory pack. So the Happy Hacking keyboard was about the equivalent purchasing power of $300 in the US in 96. Now, the $300 in 96 adjusted for inflation today comes out to just under $600, which means now you could buy a PlayStation 5, a second controller, and a charging stand, or a keyboard. Wow. So yeah, the Happy Hacking keyboard was very, very expensive. And it wasn't just that all aftermarket keyboards were expensive. This was less than $100 2 years before that came out. So that was just really exorbitantly priced. Anyway, though, it's time to get that thing open and check it out. While I get this open, let's talk about some other information about the HHK. The original one, the revision 1, was released in 1996, and this one with the Mac support came out in 1997. Now, the Mac support is an optional feature in a way, because you don't necessarily have to use it with a Mac, because one of the defining characteristics of the HHK here is the fact that it comes with a keyboard cable that is removable, kind of like an SDL cable on a Model M, and this cable is what determines which system you can plug it into. Now, this was available with cables for PCs, Macs, and Sun workstations, and the one that I have here is a PS2 cable so that I can use it on modern PCs, which is nice because I'm going to use this with a USB adapter as my main keyboard for the next week. And there it is. This thing is in really good condition. Wow, a little thing there, but yeah, outside of that, man. So that's it. It's pretty light. See, we have kickstands with rubber feet. The cable, so it's not a connector, it's a cable that it plugs into, comes down like that. All right. We can see information about this exact keyboard. So this one was made in 2000. This production line went on for a while, so this one would have been 3 years into the production run for this keyboard. And over here is a description of the switch on this keyboard. This switch allows you to change some of the modes of the keys when you're using the system. So I'll probably have to figure out which mode I end up wanting to use this in, because there are multiple modes for the different systems, SS, PC, and Mac. So I'll have to figure out which one I want to use. Now, before I disappear into the rabbit hole of trying this out, which I do want to do here, I'm curious about this. This appears to be a warranty registration card, and I did actually do a little bit of translation on it earlier because I at first thought it might have been the original purchase receipt. I'm not sure if this has ever been opened or if this was sealed by someone else, but I'm gonna open it here. Warranty registration. And then here we have what is definitely the manual. That's hilarious. The manual says it comes with the manual and probably the warranty registration card. So that's kind of cool. There's an email address available for support. Pretty powerful there. So at the bottom of the manual, it's dated 96, 97, 98. So, oh, that's okay. That's weird. It has multiple pages and they're not connected. Oh, there's an English manual. What? Congratulations, you've just purchased one of the most versatile keyboards on the market, one that works with not only the PC, but Macintosh and Unix systems as well. We hope that the high-quality workmanship, multiple platform support, and compact footprint provides you with many years of effortless touch typing. So effortless touch typing is actually an interesting thing to note here, because the HHKs were actually available legendless from the start. Even the KB01 can be found without legends on it. So that's interesting. The touch typing was definitely a big part of their plan for it. Oh, internal buzzer? Oh man, no fair. It's also got a power button. Which will apparently work for Sun and Mac, not PC, of course. You can't do that over PS2. But yeah, that's really interesting. All right, it's time. Let's get the first feel on this thing. All right. It feels okay. I don't have a big problem with that. Now, on the blank keycap option, these manuals are not equivalent, which is kind of weird. So it is a good thing that you get both, because this is really interesting and probably something those of you who have just used traditional keyboards have been wondering about. This thing is missing a lot of keys. This is the big selling point of the Happy Hacking keyboard. It's trying to be as small as possible, and I'm actually noticing here, it's actually even smaller than the print on the box makes it out to be. That's hilarious. All the keys you would need to use are there, but accessible as side legends with the function key. So you end up using layers with this thing. Layers are very much a trait of modern small keyboards, and with like QMK or whatever, you can program your own custom layers. This one is fixed, though. You cannot change the layer. So if you got the blank one, for sure you would need to have that to learn what the positions of stuff are. So that is going to take some getting used to, I can tell already. But it's kind of funny because this keyboard is somewhat the antithesis of maybe other keyboards for keyboard enthusiasts at the time, because I've already reviewed this keyboard. This is the Gateway AnyKey. This is probably a 94 variant of it, and just the main keyboard area is the same size as that, which makes sense. This does use the standard like 19 millimeter pitch for the keys. On the Happy Hacking keyboard, there's a colossal difference here in keyboard size. This is generally the direction of keyboards I've gone, so I'm curious to try out something more long-term that is so minimal. Now, this keyboard I also gave a really long test drive, and that's part of why I wanted to do it with this as well. Ooh, there are some noticeable differences there. And I think doing that with the AnyKey gave me a much better informed opinion with it. So I do want to do that with the Happy Hacking keyboard as well. So I think it's time to put this aside, get the cable connected, and go ahead and give this thing a shot. Okay, it has now been a full week of using nothing but the HHK for my modern systems. Now, I want to make it clear, I did not just hook this up to a couple of vintage computers and use it a few times. No, I replaced my Model M on my main editing system at home and the Keychron K8 that I usually use with my laptop. I was carrying it back and forth everywhere so that I could put all of my time on this thing, and I have opinions now. And yeah, so that actually means that I did everything. I responded to messages, used it with Discord, played games. I even edited the last video I did on using the CalComp Drawing Board 2 in AutoCAD on a Windows 98 PC. All of that was done with nothing but this, and I wouldn't recommend it. So we'll get into this in a moment. I'm going to hook it up to my laptop and we'll go over a bunch of things about it. But I was talking with someone about this keyboard and they asked me, could I name a single positive thing about it? And I actually stopped and thought about it, and I couldn't. Okay, let me go over the basic setup here. I am using the PS2 interface with a UA270 USB to PS2 adapter. I find that one works out pretty well, and I've not had any problems with like N key rollover or anything. I'm not a big gamer, so that's not really a problem for me generally, but you know, fair warning and all that stuff. And while I'm covering things I get questions about, the laptop stand, I don't know what it is, and I bought it at the thrift store, so I can't help you out, sorry. I get lots of comments about that. Now, the keyboard does work, so yeah, that's about what I can give it. I will say that when it comes to the funky layered layout, I didn't actually end up feeling like I was missing any keys, so I can give it that as well. All of the keys that I needed were there, and generally, I actually got accustomed enough to the layout to the point where I wasn't really feeling like it was a problem having the function keys be embedded as a layer in the regular number row. I adjusted to that well enough. That wasn't a big problem for me, and I do use those regularly. Like I use Shift F1 to bring down a drop-down terminal, and I use Dolphin on Linux, and that has shortcuts for opening the terminal with F4 and splitting a window with F3, so I use those a lot. But I didn't have any problems with that. The real problems I had were with the whole navigation side. Let me show you what I'm talking about. The navigation keys are all printed on the sides of the keys because they are part of the function layer that requires you to hold down the function key to be able to use. So if you wanted to do, say, left, you would hold function key and then press the semicolon key, as that is where the left key legend is. That actually wasn't that big of a problem for me. I adjusted fairly easily. It's kind of a pain when you want to do, say, function and then shift to select text, and even more of a pain if you want to use control and skip through words because there is no control key on this side, and I'll get to more about the control key in a bit, but that made navigation a little less optimal for me. But the biggest problem is the layout. Now, this isn't the first keyboard to use this layout. Another example here is the PC Junior keyboard that has the frustrating vertical keys over the horizontal keys instead of in between like modern keyboards have. But this is made so much worse by them just disappearing into the feel of the keys. There is zero indication of where you're at on there. On most keyboards where you have arrow keys are separate, and it's really easy to locate them on. So the combination of making them weirdly shaped and not able to be tactily felt is really difficult to deal with. So having the keys laid out in a less common pattern, in addition to being hidden on the layer, was very, very difficult to adjust to, and I never did. Even yesterday while I was streaming, I was actually making the mistake of pressing page down when I wanted to press left because I'm accustomed to it being to the left of the down key. So that I was never able to come to grips with, and every single time I wanted to use home and end, I had to look at where they are because they're so far away. Those two keys are far more useful than page up and page down and should have been next to the arrow keys instead. On the other hand, though, I guess I could be happy that it just has arrow keys because one of its main influences was the Apple M0110 keyboard here. And it doesn't even have arrow keys. So, yeah. Okay, now I want to talk about the layout more broadly here, specifically referring to its Unix cred, because a lot of documentation and people talking about this keyboard say it's a Unix layout keyboard, and by that they mean controls right there, and that's delete, and both of those are stupid. So I'll start with delete first because I think that's going to be slightly less controversial. Delete is resettable to backspace, so there is that, at least. The 4 positions on the switch, you have basically a matrix of different things you can do. You can have this be backspace or delete, and this be the Japanese character selector key or function. And having that be function just made more sense, especially with the lower F key numbers over here. So you're at least able to fix backspace to be normal because you have a regular delete key, and let's be honest, when you want to make corrections, you want to correct something that you just made an error on, which means you want to go back. The control key, though, cannot be fixed, and I hated this so much more than I thought. So first off, it means you don't have a caps lock key, which, you know, I don't need caps lock, but I usually rebind caps lock to the Windows key, especially because I use Model Ms, because I use the Windows key a lot for doing shortcuts and moving windows and things like that. It's nice to have another command key, but this key is not a super key, so you have just Control and Alt, and I wasn't able to rebind the Japanese key for some reason. It's the only keyboard scan code I've ever not been able to rebind with X-bind keys. It was kind of weird. But that meant that I was stuck with Alt and Control. So first off, I want to talk about my Keychron K8 here, where I put Control here. I called Control there being a hipster thing, and after this, I am not even going to give it a hipster thing. Having Control right here is ergonomically inferior to having it right here, and I consider it an especially egregious offense that Alt isn't at least right here. Now, I want to go over a couple of common scenarios and shortcuts to illustrate this, but the first thing I want to point out is the fact that your pinky finger is a lot shorter than your other fingers, because that plays into this quite a lot. Now, my hand tends to end up finding gamer home row, not proper typing home row. Even though I do touch type, I just end up gravitating towards that. So that's what my experience is with. Now, it is not impossible to reach Control right there when your hands are on the normal home row. That's fine. So something like Control A, that's not really that big of a deal. But when it comes to the next row of keys down, it is a lot more uncomfortable because your pinky finger has to go up and then your other fingers have to go down. So I'm actually extending my pinky finger all the way flat and then curling my other fingers over quite significantly to hit Control Z. But that's the easy one. If you want to do copy and paste, you have to spread your hand out in a very awkward and uncomfortable position to reach those keys. It does not feel natural at all. And this is because your pinky finger is going 2 whole rows of keys up higher than it should. Your fingers should be able to curl over as you're pressing the keys, but the pinky one has to go up so much and you have to bend your wrist out to actually reach it. It does not feel good. So I am going to mark my line in the sand that control absolutely should not be up there on modern systems. Now, Alt is another problem because Alt is meant to go next to the spacebar key. And it's kind of a problem on laptops, especially where a function key exists on the outside where Control normally is, and you accidentally press that instead of Control, which messes up your shortcuts. But I was having the same exact problem here with Alt being shifted in, but with the added fun of Alt now being directly in the middle, which makes it even more difficult to do. Now, Alt isn't used that commonly for shortcuts, but I actually use it a lot in my video editing software, so having that there was a bit of a problem. It's also a problem on the navigation side, and I don't know how many of you actually do this, but I use Alt left and right for back and forward a lot. So having to press Function, Alt, and then these, not my favorite thing. It's really uncomfortable to do that, and I think I ended up mostly just omitting that. Now, a somewhat related Linuxy type thing that's more modern here is related to Alt and the arrow keys, but also throwing in Control, which is used to switch desktops on a lot of Linux distros. And that's now not even possible as a one-handed operation because there's no Control key over here, meaning that you basically just don't do that shortcut because it's not worth doing to have to move your other hand over there and do that. It ends up not happening, which I very much did not enjoy. So there are just some of my grievances with the layout on this thing. Now, there's another thing about Control that I didn't even get to, and that's actually related to other keyboards. Since I use this as my only keyboard, I started building up some muscle memory for it, and I actually found myself reaching for Control where caps lock is on other keyboards. So just using this thing was actually poisoning my ability to use other keyboards, which was just extra frustrating when I don't like Control being there in the first place. So yeah, that was also annoying. So layout, not a fan in the slightest. It being small, I actually don't have a problem with, but I'm gonna get back to that. You can do much better while small. How about the key feel though? I will say this, I do actually appreciate and have preferences when it comes to key feel. I use a Model M on my desktop, and this are Gateron greens that I picked because I really like a nice, satisfying keyboard to use. This is not. Now, this is membrane, but it's not because of that. I will actually highly recommend the Dell Quiet Key membrane keyboard here. This thing, that is a very nice feeling membrane keyboard. I still use this thing every now and then when I want a membrane keyboard because I don't want loud mechanical switches or something. This is a very satisfying, nice keyboard to use that has membrane switches. Now, they're not all like that. The Gateway AnyKey, not the best membrane keyboard. These are a little mushy and not my favorite, but this thing is up there in contenders for the worst membrane switches I've ever used. Now, some of you may not have objections to the problems that I do with the switches on here, and I may as well fess up to the fact that I can't stand linear switches. I need an actuation point, and that's mostly where these start to have a problem. When my hand is on the keyboard doing something, like say moving in a first-person game, my other fingers are resting on the keys ready to be able to do something in the game. But these keys are so light and easy to press, and they don't have a solid actuation point, that my fingers' weight ends up building up on the keys and then moving in a particular direction that I'm not intending to because I can't feel when I'm about to cross the threshold to press the key and actuate it. They are so soft and smooth that it's basically impossible to control without specifically paying attention or lifting my fingers up to know when I'm going to start pressing the keys. Now, I really leave my hand on home row all the time that I'm using the keyboard, and this is somewhat of a problem. Like when I'm in a chat application, I'll have my hands there and then suddenly I'll be resting my finger on the A key, just typing away in there without even realizing it. So that bothered me above all other things. Now, when it comes to actually typing on here, I really don't actually mind how this feels. I'm totally okay with that. It's not a problem for me for how it feels. It bottoms out quite satisfyingly. The pressure, the force required, it's lower than I would like, but it's not a big problem. It's just that sinking because there is no positive actuation where the keys actually do something that your fingers can rest against. So that is my big problem with it. And even, yeah, the laptop, it's a really snappy, sharp key on there. I just can't get behind that soft feeling of it. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the switches, and it's really not because they're membrane. Again, I have no problem with the Dell Quiet Key, and I've used plenty of other membrane keys like that laptop keyboard that aren't a problem. Now, I do want to interject something else here that just I kind of don't have any other way of introducing. It has to do with the way that you connect this to the computer. So it has a cable that's just sticking straight out of it, and then you use either an extension for PS2 or adapter cable in general to connect it to the computer. I'm not really sure how it knows what kind of computer it's plugged into. I don't have an idea of which exact version this is supposed to be. It doesn't say KBO2/P on it for PC, so I'm assuming that the cable somehow shorts some pins or something that tells it which system it is, presumably if it's not PC, since this is PS2 and it seems to just be a straight through cable. But this cable kind of bothers me. I don't understand why it's not a connector on the back that you just plug the cable into, and I have concerns about the longevity of this. So first off, it's seemingly meant to be portable, like you can put it in there to make it low profile, but I don't understand why. Most laptops didn't have PS2 keyboard connectors at this time, so you couldn't actually use this with a portable computer, meaning that you would be taking it around with a desktop or maybe taking it between multiple desktops. I mean, it was, you know, ridiculously expensive, so maybe if you wanted to use it at home and work, that would make sense, but elsewise, I don't know why it would be portable. So that kind of baffles me. But the other thing I want to point out is that it has this cable routing space here that you would need to use if you're going to use it flat. And my recommendation is to just not use it flat. Use it with the feet kicked out, because this is an extremely sharp turn to try and make that cable go through to fit it in there. And I have a feeling you're just going to end up bending this back and forth, and that's going to be a really bad time overall. And you'll end up fraying the copper inside and having it break, and then it just won't work anymore. So I would recommend letting this hang down from the bottom of the keyboard with the feet. That way it can move freely and not be a problem. So that's a thing there, yeah. So I don't like the weird layout, which is kind of its shtick, and I don't like the feel of the keys, which just makes that outrageous price tag all the more ridiculous. So yeah, I really don't have a lot of redeeming things to say about it here. I was actually really tempted to write a script for this instead of just kind of ramble on here. And actually the thought of having to use the keyboard to do that during my week of testing it is what put me off of doing that. So this video could have been shorter if it had been a better keyboard. And I want you to keep in mind, I wrote a script on this thing, and these keys, these are better. These are on the Tandy WP2, a portable word processor that I'm pretty sure costs less than the whole keyboard did. Yeah. Now, there is something that I alluded to earlier, and that is a keyboard that is superior to this and predates it. And that is the Cherry G84. Happy Hacking Keyboard meet Cherry G84 ML 4100. This keyboard is around the same time period as this one, I believe slightly predating it, and is in my opinion superior in every possible way. First off, if you actually care about size, it is narrower, it is not as thick, but it is actually slightly taller. But that is forgivable for the fact that it actually has function keys. Well, most of them, F11 and F12, are relegated to being layered there, which is one of just a few layered keys, because for the most part, the only layer that they actually give you is a numpad, which is kind of cool. This does not have a numpad layer, so that's a benefit. There are some instances where those keys are functionally different, but very rarely. Honestly, I don't feel like this was missing any keys that I actually needed, so that's not a total requirement. But more importantly, the arrow keys are correct and in a position that makes sense when you try and reach for them. The home, page control, and end keys are in a location that makes sense. Backspace is backspace. Caps lock is caps lock. Control is where it belongs. They didn't even put the function key in the wrong place. Although they did actually screw up putting a tilde key here instead of alt, so that's a little annoying. But overall, the layout on the Cherry is much better. That doesn't get into the key switches though. So the Happy Hacking keyboard has the weird membrane covered switches. The Cherry though, as the model name gives away, uses a mechanical switch known as ML. These switches rock. I think it's kind of a popular thing to hate on these in the keyboard world. Don't buy into the negative hype. These switches are excellent for their size. Every laptop made since this thing came out should have had these switches. I think there's a modern version that they have that's supposedly superior, and I'm not sure I buy it. These things rock. They have a very solid actuation point, and they bottom out really nice and sharply. I love these switches, which means this has a better layout, has a better key feel, it has more keys. It's a better keyboard in basically the same size. Now, I will give the Happy Hacking keyboard its one accolade. The Cherry keyboard is not going to support multiple systems, but while I don't know what this cost, I have a feeling if they made it in different versions, you would be able to afford buying one of each as opposed to the cost of this thing, because this thing was, again, unbelievably expensive. Well, I think that is everything for the Happy Hacking keyboard. That thing is going back in the box after this video. I don't plan on ever daily driving one of these again, or any keyboard of this size. This definitely put me off of that entirely, which is kind of nice to know that I made the right choice on the K8 size here. But I just find it kind of funny because even with Apple, who started out with the smaller keyboards, they went to the full-size IBM clone kind eventually with their ADB keyboards, so even they didn't want to go that route. There are people who are going to like this layout. I don't see it. Yeah, I guess to each their own. It obviously had its audience since they still exist and are being sold today. I just can't fathom using it. Jerry, who sent this thing, I really do appreciate it. It gave me the opportunity to experience it, and I actually did enjoy the process of learning to use the keyboard, even if I didn't enjoy the keyboard itself. So there was some value there. But that is it for now. So if you enjoyed this review of the Happy Hacking keyboard, you may want to subscribe and check out some other keyboard videos I did. I have a video on the build of the Keychron. I have a review of the Gateway AnyKey, and I think I even have a video of the G84 on my secondary channel. I bought that for my tiny Pentium system, so it has never really been a mainstay keyboard for me. But yeah, so if you want to help support the channel, I am on Patreon. But for now, that's it, and I will see you next time. Oh, I'm free. Oh, baby, I missed you. I'll never cheat on you again. Oh, so much better.